Why does every role-playing game have to be either some high fantasy, dragon-slaying, chainmail bikini Dungeons and Dragon clone, or a high science fiction, space-exploring, and alien-boning action romp? Okay, that's totally a straw man question, I'll give you that, but it's hard to argue that a vast majority of RPGs fit anywhere other than one of those two categories. It's funny how as broad a term as role-playing game has come to mean such a rigidly strict set of definitions. Well, Warhorse Studios figured they were going to change all that, completely overhauling the fantasy-style RPG by removing the fantasy elements and completely ignoring science fiction altogether. What they came up with is Kingdom Come: Deliverance, a game that's trying to be the most historically accurate and period-authentic game ever made.
I decided to quit my well-paid job and started a new company called Warhorse to develop an open-world, medieval, realistic RPG you just saw called Kingdom Come: Deliverance. You can think of it as a Braveheart game. Majestic castles, armored knights, large-scale battles, political intrigues, all set in a large medieval open world.
You know, one of the good things about this episode is that I don't have to spend half of it talking about what game inspired it, or what game it's a sequel or spiritual successor to. It's a nice breath of fresh air, isn't it? Kingdom Come: Deliverance. Realistic single-player RPG set in the medieval Europe. Open-world sandbox with period-accurate melee combat. Yes, the main conceit of this game is that it's totally historically accurate and authentic. It's not Battlefield 1, which is just a World War II shooter with a different coat of paint. Kingdom Come is aiming to put you in the shoes of an adventurer in medieval Europe, specifically in the Kingdom of Bohemia, and yeah, I'm a bit of a historian, but this is way out of my wheelhouse, honestly. Let's read the story description in that case, shall we? The year is 1403, and it is most certainly not the best of times. The old king is dead, long live the king, and his heirs are weak. The new king's brother, hungry for power, allies himself with a faction of nobility that sees this moment as an opportunity for advancement. Kidnaps the king, invading the country with an army of his own to plunder the defenseless land. The aristocracy is divided between which side to support. Civil war is coming. Okay, so unless you've got a really big brain, like, you might not really understand what's going on. That's okay, we all have to resort to Wikipedia sometimes. Quick rundown, which won't be quick at all. Bohemia is now modern-day Czech Republic, who are trying to change their name to Czechia, by the way, which is a fairly nondescript nation back in ye olden times because it was actually an imperial state. This game at the start of the sort of Christian Renaissance that was trying to knock a guy named Jan, or maybe Jan, and kind of allied himself with a British guy named John Wycliffe, and just look this up yourself. Trust me, it's relevant, though not really important, I guess. This whole thing about a king being killed and his weak heir taking over never actually happened, though. Not in 1403, anyway. There were the Hussite Wars that were more or less a civil war, but that didn't start until 1419, which was less than 1403. There, throwing the math nerds a bone with that one. Anyway, that's all just background details that would be nice to know going into it. The plot of the game itself is about as generic as a beige wall in a library with a poster of a Clive Cussler novel on it. I might as well make this episode as nerdy as possible. In the midst of this plunder and chaos, a son of a blacksmith will emerge as a hero. His home destroyed, and his family murdered by the invading army, he must redeem his failure to protect those he loved and set things right again. Avenging the death, safeguarding the kingdom's rightful ruler, and restoring order will prove no small feat for our adventurer. It's funny because later down the page there's a section called Death to the Tired Clichés, talking about not having to kill rats to level up your character. I guess the narrative clichés are A-okay. But yes, as you probably saw there, player choice is a big part of this game. Your character is defined by your choices. Your abilities and stats grow depending on what you do. You decide how you want to appear. Every quest can be solved in multiple ways. Branch dialogue trees grant you the freedom to express yourself. Your reputation is based on your choices, and every choice you make carries appropriate consequences. There are no class restrictions. You can do anything you want. They go on to talk about different playstyles, such as stealth, being a brawler, or even a bard, as well as dialogue options. Of course, this is a modern-day RPG, so expect lots of different skills, leveling, crafting, and a big open world to explore. All of that stuff is nice, but the main attraction here is the setting.
So even details like this windmill here, for example, is very well researched from our team, from our full-time historian. So Joanna took really care to make it as realistic as possible. So we see, let me just walk around here, that this mill is something that is supposed to be there in the year 1403. The mills really looked like that in South Bohemia. They had, or maybe even in the entire.
You might be wondering what I mean when I say historical accuracy and authenticity. Aren't they the same thing? Well, no, they're not, especially where video games are concerned. To go back to force of habit. To go back to Battlefield 1, it's clear as day from the trailers and gameplay footage that the game will be about as historically authentic as Michael Bay's Pearl Harbor. Yeah, they got the big details right, water, ships, and Japanese airplanes for Pearl Harbor, and trenches, hand-to-hand combat, and sheer misery for Battlefield 1. But both of those take extreme liberties with the settings they're based on to make things fun. Sorry, this is the history buff in me again getting upset at people who say history can't be fun. Nothing's totally out of place per se. You'd have to take some liberties, but it works. Kind of. That's what we mean by historical authenticity. You can't just have the right pieces, you have to move them together in place in the right order. On the other hand, historical accuracy is all about accurately portraying events in the textbook sense. Pearl Harbor and Battlefield 1 at least have that going for them. It's not often we see a game strive for one of these, but Kingdom Come is trying to go 2 for 2. You will not find any dragons, half-naked elven warriors, or wizards in Kingdom Come Deliverance. At no point will you have to collect 7 pieces of a legendary magic staff to defeat the ancient evil bent on destroying the world with an army of demons. We want to bring you a strong story rooted in the height of the Middle Ages, brought to life in all its glory. So what is Kingdom Come Deliverance? Think of it as Braveheart the game. It's not exactly the best metaphor. Majestic castles, armored knights, large open field battles, and political intrigue set in a vast emergent world. We want to make the experience as authentic as possible. Real-world locations, real castles that don't look like something from Disneyland, period-accurate armor and costumes, combat and fencing systems designed in collaboration with the most knowledgeable, skillful swordsmen around, and a story based on actual, historic events. It goes beyond the absence of typical fantasy elements, though. There are real-world locations in-game, like castles that are still standing to this day. Those castles have been explored by the developers, and are meticulously designed to match what they would have looked like 600 years ago. There are also real towns and villages that would have been around then too, though obviously they had to take a more creative approach to recreating those. The people, from villagers to peasants to those higher in society, all act accordingly as well, and that's reflected on you. So if you're wearing knight's armor, people will respect you because they think you're a knight, or if you're in rags, they'll look down on you and chastise you for being poor, as you do. It doesn't stop there, though. If you're wearing armor that's covered in mud and dirt, because that can happen, you'll get comments about how lazy you are, and everyone will just kind of want to stay away from you. Or if you just came out of battle and you're covered in blood in GS5 style, they'll think you're a lunatic and won't want to do business and, again, stay pretty far away from you. It doesn't wash away on its own, so you'll have to either wait for it to rain or find a source of water to clean your gear and clothes in. That level of realism is something Warhorse is trying to carry over to combat, and it's really one of the more intriguing aspects of the Kickstarter. Our combat mechanics are the most challenging feature of our game. They're based on actual 15th century techniques and designed in cooperation with medieval martial arts experts to be as authentic as possible. The controls are as intuitive as in first-person shooters, and, thanks to a few tricks, we have a large amount of different moves and combos. On top of that, the whole thing is based on real-time physics and inverse kinematics. Yeah, so when you hit something, your hands and weapon, not just your target, react accordingly, which is something that was not possible on last-gen hardware. It certainly sounds ambitious, if a bit vague. You might be getting flashes from CLANG! From that description. go watch our video if you're confused. Well, thanks to the benefit of time, we get to see how the combat mechanics have translated to actual gameplay, and so far they're looking pretty close to what you might have envisioned. As far as I can tell, and from what we've heard from the beta testers, the system works really well. There's a 5-point star in the center of the screen, and which end you highlight chooses where you'll swing or lunge your sword, or block your body. You can't always just aim for the head or chest because your opponent will always guard those areas closest, cause why wouldn't you? So you'll have to throw them off guard by attacking their arms or legs. You'll also have to block against them as well, as they're trying to do the same thing to you. It sounds almost like a chess game, but you only have a split second to make your move, and I'm not really sure we've ever seen anything quite like it in games before. Of course, we'll have to wait and see until the game is released before we make any definitive ruling, but if they can pull this off, they could change the way first-person melee is handled in gaming. Can't be any worse than Skyrim anyway.
That thing you have in your hand is a sword. I'm a human and I want to kill you. Try walking around a bit. Movement around the battleground is just as important as being able to swing.
See, that's the authenticity part. Warhorse is building a world that makes you feel like you're in 1403 Bohemia during a, however, fictional civil war. They're not just taking bits and pieces of it and putting it in some grand fantasy setting. That's what they're claiming anyway. From what footage we've seen of the game so far, and early access reviews it's getting, it's safe to say they're hitting the mark. Warhorse has done something with the rewards that I don't think anyone has done before, and something I didn't really think was necessarily legal. It's a grey area to say the least. As part of the £600 reward tier, a little less than $1,000 US, they promised to give backers swords. And they didn't mean some plastic model or small collectible. No, this is a real sword, handmade for each and every backer on that tier. They're giving people real weapons as part of rewards, and I don't know if that's scary or incredible. Despite the questionable nature of that reward, it does highlight Warhorse's one failing with this Kickstarter, which is their communication. It hasn't been dreadful like some others, but it hasn't been totally great either. The swords, for example, were supposed to be shipped out in December 2014, but they only made announcements saying they had gone into production in April of this year. Kingdom Come is also supposed to be available for consoles and Linux as well, but so far it's only available on PC. The developers have been quiet about Linux support, and the commenters have been venting their frustration openly. One backer, Anton Kirkin, says they contacted the community manager who said they were still in negotiations regarding platform support. Not only is it bad to force backers to go to some forum to get answers, it also goes against what they sell on Kickstarter. It was stated from the beginning that Linux and console versions would be made. Now they're saying they're still negotiating with their publisher to allow it? You'll also see in the comments that backers weren't directly informed about the game's delay into 2017. Not on Kickstarter at least, something that has yet to been remedied. All of this can probably be found on Warhorse's own website or other news outlets, but if you're sending your backers to other places to get information about your game, you failed. If you want to keep backers in the loop, which you should, you need to communicate with them on Kickstarter, the place where they first found you and gave you money. Not send them jumping through hoops, however low down those hoops happen to be. But on the whole, I think backers have a lot to be happy about. Kingdom Come isn't out yet, but so far it's getting good reviews and positive attention, especially after E3 this year. It's got a long way to go, but it's nearing completion, finally. With any luck, not only will Kingdom Come Deliverance be good, it'll also inspire a whole new wave of fantasy games that strip away the dragons and magic and replace it with historical accuracy, and, more importantly, historical authenticity. We'll have to see when the game comes out how accurately it sticks to those principles, but so far, things are looking good.
Producers we've met like the game and the team, but when we've got to the sales and marketing people, problems came up. At the time of the pitching, everybody thought that the next-gen consoles are doomed, and nothing other than free-to-play MMOs for iPad will sell. So when we turned up with a pretty unique new concept of consoles, it was flagged as very risky. On top of that, we got a lot of questions like, is it going to be fun without magic and dragons? And the negotiations were taking forever. So finally, nearly a year after we began pitching Deliverance to publishers, we came to a crossroads. Either we fold the whole thing and do a free-to-play MMO for iPad, or we find some other way to fund the game.
Ooh, Ooh, that was a tough video to make. I spent all of the time talking about the history and not about the actual game itself. Yes. So anyway, it's been a pretty slow week on the site itself. Well, we're all recovering from the 4th of July, I think. I know I am. Serena has written an article about Discarded Angel, well, it's a porn game, really. Of course it is. Yeah, that's really all I have to say about it. And also, Dan Miller wished Shenmue 3 a happy birthday, because it has now been, well, over 1 year now since it released on Kickstarter, and has kind of vanished off the face of the earth, but that'll get its own Kicked episode in time. If you enjoyed this video or any of the articles on our site, be sure to donate to our Patreon page, because reasons. I'll come up with a better reason one day, but until then, reasons.